So, Wired magazine really stepped in at this time. I mean, not really. They are kind of guilty of telling the truth. In a headline that I never would have expected from the outlet by somebody that I certainly would not have expected the opinion from. Believe it or not, there's some salient points. Now, I'm inspired in today's video by our friend Andre over at Midnight's Edge. Why? Because, well, he helped inspire the article. You see, the Acolyte and the long-awaited death of review bombing is kind of his baby, along with Coach and a few other well-inspired people behind two expensive microphones, according to this authoress. But it's true because, well, whether or not something's review bombed or not does not mean very much now. There's nobody watching these Star Wars shows. They're falling by the wayside. I just dropped a video right up here talking about the significant decline in viewership and the fact that, well, people have kind of spoken and then they stopped. You have reviews dropping all the time on content all around the internet, but what soaks up all the oxygen are shows on Netflix like Bridgerton and similar things, mainly because those shows are targeted at a broad audience of ladies for whatever reason. The only other time that you see Disney anywhere is when they're running Bluey, and it happens to be the best kids program out there, according to some. But in getting back to the article, the long-awaited death of review bombing, well, it's died. Some are calling it review bombing, but it's more complicated than that. Nuance. How rare. And at the beginning of her article, she's a little witty, saying, you've gone too deep into YouTube fandom when you can't remember which dude with an expensive microphone told you what while speaking straight to camera. That's a good point. There are lots of us. Some of us look similar to each other, and some of us even have the same expensive microphone. Good on you. Thanks for noticing. Still, earlier this week, that was the particular Sarlacc pit that I'd been sucked into. Word had spread that fans were review bombing the Acolyte on Rotten Tomatoes, and curiosity got the best of me. First, I watched this dude with a mic video, which claimed that Lucasfilm's president Kathleen Kennedy doesn't like Star Wars fans. Well, I think that's an easy conclusion to draw. Maybe you would agree. And since, as Andre points out in his brilliant video, it just kind of has been borne out in the products that she produces, which is all driven by ladies. And if you want some feedback on that, check out Paul Chatto's most recent video that maybe ladies shouldn't be involved in Star Wars. But I'm not going to say anything like that. Paul, those are all for you. But they go on and eventually talk about Coach and ultimately end up finding an analysis video of our great friend Andre, along with a thumbnail, and realizing that maybe, just maybe, there's a point here. It's hard to say that any of the YouTube pundits were wrong or right, and doing so would be a surefire way to become the subject of the next analysis video. Well, welcome. You didn't have to go either direction, and you're being covered here. Why? Because you had a halfway decent take on something, although I don't agree with you completely. I do find it interesting that you somehow managed to throw your identity into the article, which is one of the problems everybody's having with modern entertainment now. Because identitarian garbage is something we're trying to get away from. Putting it in an article like this, well, I mean, kind of picking a side. Anyway, for perspective, here's what's happened. The Acolyte hit Dune. We'll try that again. Sorry. The Acolyte hit Disney Plus on June 4th. The critical score on the Tomatometer sat somewhere in the 80-plus range. Not quite fresh, certified fresh, but pretty solid. In the intervening weeks, the score plummeted and now hovers between 13 and 14%. Yeah, the number of reviews have also fallen. The reviews per week, which I cover in, again, that video right up there. Go check it out. But since some reports connected to this flood of bad scores show to the show's diverse cast and LGBTQ plus themes, the lesbian space witches, which that's what they are. There's been a debate about whether the poor reviews were coming from a homophobic, racist, or misogynist corners of the fandom. Not particularly. So, don't want to read that. Let's skip down. So, these comments led to a bunch of reaction videos, which is how I ended up in the YouTube rabbit hole. Each video I watched had lots of nuance, but one of the theme kept coming up, and that seems to be the heart of the problem. The reviewers aren't bigots. They just think the Acolyte is garbage and not Star Wars. I think we've been saying that loudly all the way back from like the sequel trilogy, but I could be wrong. Disney's ownership of Lucasfilm is ruining the franchise, and these irritated fans are posting reviews to point out the show's many flaws. Well, yeah, it's kind of what we do. We either praise or admonish entertainment because that's part of what we do on YouTube. Sometimes we offer opportunities and other things that might improve Star Wars overall or any of the other things that we cover. We sometimes offer entire stories that could be told. What are usually ignored, but hey, I mean, comes from having a YouTube channel rather than having a studio person's ear. Regardless, the only way for Star Wars to stay relevant is to let other people do new things with it. That's an interesting statement, one that I'm not entirely in agreement with. Certainly, you have to have people do stuff with Star Wars, but you need to have actual fans do stuff with Star Wars and not people who are pummeling you with things that aren't Star Wars. That seems to be what everybody's been saying. So, taking this at face value, I'd like to say, okay, and putting aside personal feelings about the show's quality, which in here she admits several things and inserts herself into the story, there's another argument to be made. Sometimes franchises have bad installments, or just installments not everyone enjoys, and that's fine. I guess that's true. Star Wars, like all brilliant creations, derives its genius from its malleability. George Lucas' world building thrives on the fact that anyone can imagine what's happening 3 star systems away. And that's all true. So, Disney has maybe gone too overboard with the amount of content it's made since its $4 billion acquisition of Lucasfilm in 2012. On that, I think everybody can agree. Even CEO Bob Iger has copped to that. But trying to say that it's an untouchable franchise that shouldn't be iterated upon is ridiculous. And I don't think that's what anybody has been suggesting. I think if you're going to be Disney owning this IP, you need to bring in people like Jon Favreau, who kind of gets it and understands the fan base and the fact that it's a boy property. And, well, just look at all of the things that you've seen recently from Star Wars. Not a lot of boys in there. Anyway, every band makes one album their true fans don't like. Okay, interesting argument, but there's been very little, if anything, that people in the Star Wars fandom have liked, outside of the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian, and then promptly, because of identitarian politics and other neo-Marxism, you should probably look that up if you're curious about that, Miss Wirecutter. But, we lost the one good future thing that was going to come along with it, along with Mandalorian, which, of course, was Gina Carano's show. Should look into how that went down. And in comparison, how some people just get away with saying things and others don't because they're not saying the right things, regardless. So Ahsoka is mentioned here, as is Acolyte, as is many other things. But I don't think that steadily declining viewership is anything to crow about. And if you did a little bit of research for your article, you would understand that the new fans aren't materializing and the old ones are disappearing. And that's not good for anybody. Regardless, as she mentions here, we still have the original Star Wars trilogy starting in 1977. So 50 years after the fact, or very nearly there, there's been too many things, is one of the things she suggests. And perhaps 2024 didn't need more from Star Wars. On that, we probably can agree. And her spouting off about the excellence of Andor is kind of amusing because it's still quite a divisive storyline. But at least an understanding of the initial offering of Mandalorian exists somewhere out there in the press. And for that, I'm thankful. All of which is to say, review bombing is over. Not because people should stop doing it. Well, it happens positively as well. Or because no one is really doing it to begin with, which I would argue is probably more likely. Rather, it's finished as a concept. I don't think that's true. I think you're still going to see people expressing displeasure via audience scores. And if you don't think that gets Kathleen Kennedy's attention and Disney's attention and investors' attention, well, you haven't been paying attention. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this very interesting article in Wired, and you can go and read it for yourself. I have removed a bunch of annoying ads and pictures and things like that you'll be confronted with because, well, Wired is desperate for survival and money, which I can't blame them. They're a business. They want to stay together in good shape and remain one of the few digital outlets that might survive the media apocalypse that's going on right now that not enough people are talking about. She also, of course, goes on to reveal herself by saying, maybe Stefan should review The Acolyte. This thread makes a pretty compelling case, saying here, the hottest show in the galaxy is The Acolyte. It's got everything, Jedi Wookiee, which they killed off screen, lesbian space witches, true, conservative tier cocktails, telling on yourself, and Carrie Ann Moss, well, briefly, and then she was killed. So, yeah. Anyway, regardless, I think I'm done with this article for today, so I have to ask you all a question. Are you inspired to watch any future Disney Star Wars? Would the franchise be better off without Disney? And finally, do you think the media is starting to get it now? And that calling us names isn't going to work well when we actually have a point? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. I appreciate each and every one of you. And if this is your first time or your 1,000th time watching a video here, please not only hit that like button, but also subscribe. Turn the little red button to gray. It'll help me out as we get closer and closer to 25K. On that note, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya.